You're live. It is official. Here we are. Welcome to Health and Happiness at Work. This is a podcast geared toward busy working adults. My name is Katie Tombaugh. I'm the founder and CEO of Wellness Collective, and I'm just excited to be here today. It was a little tough squeezing this in. Admittedly, it's been a wild ride in business this month, and it's soon to be spring break for me and my family. But I thought, you know what? I really want to squeeze this in and make this a priority. So here we are. This might be a little bit of a shorter episode based on some of what I've shared so far, but I think that's okay. And I think this will be a chance for us to test maybe a shorter format and see what folks think. So with that, I am here today and this month with a theme of possibility, positivity. I call this content WINSday, WINS day. I like to give folks the backstory on why I address certain topics, why this is on my mind or on my heart. So I will let you know that I was working with a client. We were speaking that particular day, a large group, like a learning and development situation. I was facilitating a session and we were working on confidence, talking about confidence, what are choices and strategies we can do and use to build confidence within ourselves and others. So anyways, in the process of delivering that content, it came up, I think, several times, this idea of positive psychology. What is it? How do we use positivity tactics? I just had a couple of examples in that particular session. And I said to the client, you know what, if this interests you, I can do a full session on positivity and possibility and how do we use this for good within the workday. So anyhow, I developed the content further and spoke on this topic a few times, and it seems to be of interest to folks. And so you may have heard me share this before on past episodes. I am a student of positive psychology. It's something that I've just chosen to study and lean into, particularly in my professional development. And it's something that we as health coaches are trained to use and leverage. And because it's familiar to me, you know, I think of it often, I use it often, but it's occurring to me that that might not be everyone else's reality. So when and if something's interesting to me, I want to make sure other folks know about it. And as always, I'll put my spin on it and give you some specific ways to really bring this into the workday. So whether you are someone that manages a small group of teams or whether you are just an individual looking to feel more optimistic, be a strong cheerleader essentially for the rest of your team, I think I'll have something for you today. So that's a little bit on the backstory. I will tell you just a little bit maybe about the history of positive psychology. I do think I get into this on other episodes, but hey, maybe you haven't heard those. So traditionally in psychology, psychologists have focused more on human suffering and how do we help people to heal from adverse situations, adverse experiences, experiences perceived as traumatic. How do we diagnose and treat mental health conditions and disorders? And all of this is incredibly important work. This is how it's been for hundreds of years. Fast forward to the last couple of decades, and there is far more interest and research and legwork being done, research being done in the field of positive psychology. And so positive psychology looks at what might go right or what is going right, and how do we use this to support this idea of human flourishing and helping people to really optimize their lives personally, professionally. How do we use positive psychology in schools, in workplaces, in group situations or scenarios, and in our individual lives? So this is, again, what I've been studying. It is sometimes referred to as the science of happiness, also referred to as well-being theory. It all ties back to the legwork done by Dr. Martin Seligman out of University of Pennsylvania. So this is essentially the foundation of what we're talking about today is positive psychology basics or positive psychology interventions that can be leveraged as an individual person or across groups. So with that, when we look at well-being theory, when we look at the science of happiness, when we look at life satisfaction, one of the key drivers is positive emotion. So we'll be talking today a lot about emotions or feelings, and we'll be talking about how our words impact how that's relayed, how we're exchanging information with others. But it also involves our body language. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. But I really wanted to just remind listeners that emotions are contagious. And if we know that humans benefit from feeling positive emotion with some consistency and frequency, it begs the question, how do we do that? What brings someone joy or excitement or pleasure or contentment, and so emotions are contagious in the work day, in the workplace. Heck, even, you might think of a meeting you went to where the emotions in the room were tangible or felt, by the masses. If one person is in a tricky place or a bad mood, it is very, very easy to pick that up. We are wired as humans to have empathy. That's a typical, normal, healthy human behavior. We're wired with what are called mirror neurons. And so that is part of our anatomy, part of our brain that essentially causes us to mirror what other people are doing. And so we'll mirror even their body language. If someone smiles at us, we might smile back. If someone opens their arms, we might open our arms back. If someone is in a great mood, we are likely to pick up on some of that positive energy. And conversely, if somebody's got the ick going on in terms of their mood or outlook or perspective, we can pick up on that as well. This did come up last month. I was talking about passion. And I now that I'm saying it all out loud, I'm like, oh, I think I spoke on this recently, but bear with me. I public speak a lot. So certainly bound to repeat myself on the podcast, but it doesn't hurt to hear it more than once. So because emotions are contagious, we want to be really aware of what we're putting out and what potentially other people are picking up. So again, that kind of makes the case for what I'm sharing today in terms of how do we spread more positivity? How do we spread more possibility, keeping our minds open to ideas and outcomes? And how do we do this within the workday? Before I get into some specifics and nuts and bolts and recommendations and things like that, I wanted to talk a little bit about optimism. So optimism is something I think in terms of your outlook and your hope and your belief that good things can and do happen and will continue to happen. This is something that some folks maybe have a little bit more naturally. They're naturally more optimistic. It could be part nature, part nurture. And then there are individuals where it really is not their nature. It's not their default. And so they might have a little bit of a rain cloud or more of an Eeyore perspective or outlook on things. So we're going to talk today about optimism and pessimism. It is worth noting that positive psychology research has asked the question, like, can we learn? Can we learn to be more optimistic? And the answer is yes. Yes, we can. We can, well, I'm trying to think of how much I want to get into that, but we can choose to work on that. We can choose to work on optimism, and I'll be talking about that here in just a moment. But like anything in life, we have to practice. We have to first have a certain amount of awareness, and then we have to decide, like, gosh, I think that's something that I want to work on. So we're going to talk here about explanatory styles in a moment, and that will get into optimism and pessimism. Now, before we do that, and I forgot to include this on my backstory, another common practice or recommendation in health and wellness is around gratitude. And gratitude would absolutely fall into the positive psychology realm and bucket, and is an intervention that is known to be incredibly supportive. I think in my industry, we're doing a great job talking about gratitude. How do we establish as individuals a gratitude practice? How do we spend a little bit of intentional time each day, throughout the day, or at the end of the day, to bring forth what we're grateful for, acknowledge that for which we're grateful? It's something that families can do as a practice, and it really does help our our souls, I would say, to be less in a space of social comparison. And, that's something that is very real, especially with social media. It's just so easy to look at what other people have in terms of material items or opportunities or assets or resources or whatever, and to compare ourselves or to compare our journeys, and that is not a great use of energy. So when we are in a place of gratitude, it sort of shifts our brains and shifts our perspective and our outlook to realizing that what we have is enough and what we have is a part of our unique journey. And so anyways, gratitude, I think we're doing a really good job talking about that. I do think a lot of health and wellness programs bring that in. And what we know is that there's a correlation between practicing gratitude and health and well-being. And so positivity and optimism, it's going to fall into that same bucket. So as promised, let's talk a little bit about optimism versus pessimism. These are referred to as explanatory styles. That's basically a way to say, how do folks make sense of things? Like, two people can go through the same event, two people can go through the same situation, two people can go through the same meeting at work and have completely different experiences of it, of the meeting, of the scenario or the event. And this is important for us to remember, is that people will always have different perspectives. Anytime there's multiple people in a room, there are likely to be multiple perspectives. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but it's powerful just to recognize what's happening. And so I thought I would give and share some of the defining characteristics of what pessimism looks like as compared to optimism. So someone who is in a place of pessimism or being more negative, has a more negative outlook or perspective on things, they will generally look at an experience as permanent. Like, oh my gosh, this awful thing is happening and it's going to be this way forever. As opposed to an optimist who says, you know what, this too shall pass. This is a now thing. This is a temporary hiccup or blip on the radar, and this really maybe sucks right now, but this too shall pass. So that's kind of a pretty significant difference, right? Between it's going to be this way forever or permanent, or this is temporary and this will pass. The next characteristic in terms of pessimism is a pessimist will go through a situation and see it as pervasive or global, meaning, okay, I'm having this difficult experience, and now I'm realizing that everything is difficult. This is difficult in my life. That is difficult in my life. This is going to keep showing up in my life. So not only is it going to last forever, it's going to keep appearing everywhere. It's just really pervasive is the descriptor, as compared to an optimist whose perspective will be a little bit more along the lines of, you know what, this is really difficult or challenging in this one area of my life, but there are lots of other things that are going well, and there are strengths that I have. And so whatever that challenge or adversity is, it's seen to be localized and not everywhere across the individual's lived experience. Continuing down some of the key characteristics, if we go back to pessimism, a pessimist will oftentimes take a situation and their experience of it and personalize it and say, you know, this always happens to me. This is a me thing. They might even say it's my fault. Everything's highly personalized, whereas an optimist will be able to look at a situation or an experience and have the perspective of, you know what, this sometimes happens, and I'm not the only variable here. I'm not at fault for everything. There are other individuals and other people involved. And so this isn't something that I get credit for, right? And if you're a follower of the 4 agreements, that is a big key characteristic or recommendation as well, is to not take things personally, because there are many variables, there are many considerations, and oftentimes it has nothing to do with us and everything to do with many other moving parts. And then the final characteristic of a pessimistic explanatory style is this belief that events and outcomes or outcomes or possibilities are completely uncontrollable. And so a pessimist will say something like, and there's nothing I can do about it. um, and there may be some events in life where there is nothing we can do about it. Like if a natural disaster happens, that is within Katie's control, or not within Katie's control. It's outside of Katie's control. There isn't anything to do about it. But I don't know if there is a difficult situation in the workplace. An optimist will take a different perspective and they'll say, you know what can I do about it? What is within my control or influence? How might I use some agency and work through the situation? An optimist will maybe have those tough conversations and maybe will ask the question, what can I do? What positive step can I take if I'm having a tough time? So I thought that was worth exploring today as we go into this topic of positivity. So all that to say, we can learn to become more optimistic, have an outlook that is hopeful and balanced. And, it also looks at things through many different possibilities as opposed to everything being so black and white. And so that's kind of what we see with the pessimism or the pessimist is everything is extreme, everything is final, everything is global, everything is really amplified. And an optimist is willing to kind of unpack it very differently. And so we can start to become aware of ourselves and our tendencies and our perspectives, and we can talk ourselves through them, and we can practice different healthy habits, different interventions like I'm going to share today that will help us to look for the good, look for what might go right, and to look for the learning or to look for what are some of the other things to consider. So before we get into that, there is another what would I call it? Phrase, topic, idea that ties to what we're talking about today, because there is such a thing as being so overtly positive or so overtly optimistic that it actually becomes problematic, or it's referred to as what's called toxic positivity. And so I'll try to embody this or give you an example. So maybe it's that person in the office who's sort of bubbly and bouncing around. And anytime there's something difficult going on or challenging going on, this individual will say, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It's totally fine. We're fine. You're healthy. There's nothing to worry about. As long as you've got your health, you're good. And so the concern here is that there are likely to be times where an individual is having a really difficult day. Like I think about somebody losing a loved one. I think about grief. I think about depression. I think about anxiety. I think about, any type of crisis. In those situations, the individual is going to have feelings. They are going to be sad, or they're going to be angry, or they're going to be upset, or they're going to be shocked. And so we need to hold space for people to have whatever emotion they're having, and they're having whatever reaction they're having. It's their reality, and it is healthy and normal to express a wide variety of emotions. So there may be a time where, again, somebody's going through something really difficult. They express that they're having a tough time. I'm really sad about this. I'm really angry. I'm really frustrated, whatever it is. And so what's more supportive than just being like super sun is shining and positive is to say something that reflects back what you're hearing and observing. Like, wow, it sounds like this really difficult thing happened. I hear you. I see you. It's, I hope you're feeling well supported right now. It sounds like you're really having a tough time. Is there anything I can do for you? We need to hold space to validate folks' feelings and experiences, and be supportive. And sometimes coming in with that big, but hey, don't worry about it because, we need to celebrate this isn't the right use of the positivity, because others are allowed to have other feelings. So toxic positivity, it's something you could kind of look into and understand, just so you can kind of spot it if it's happening, and or if you're kind of having that tendency that you want to override, someone's experience. All right. So before I get into some very specific examples of using positivity in the workday and this idea of celebration, that's really where I want to head, is how do we celebrate and get positive emotion up within the workday? What's the motive here? When I think about this content and when I think about these practices, my hope is that we can build confidence in ourselves and confidence in others. And so, as an example, if we see someone at work or in our lives just really crushing it, like they are crushing it, using their strengths, shining in whatever way that they shine, when we see that, that is like a phenomenal opportunity to acknowledge it. If you're in a meeting with someone and they just completely shine and they are in their zone of genius and they are just clearly like putting their best foot forward, their character strengths are shining through, their work strengths are shining through, like acknowledge it, like, hey, I was really impressed with how you navigated that situation. I was really excited about the ideas you had for solving this problem. If we can acknowledge what people do well and what they're best at, and we can sort of catch them doing it and then tell them what we admire about it, or what we observed or witnessed and how it impacted us, think about how that person's confidence is likely to go up. So it's this idea that if you see that attribute in someone, don't keep that compliment to yourself. Give that praise, give those words of admiration, give it to the person, right? Give it to the coworker who is just really crushing it and modeling some really amazing talents, right? So that's one thing I think that's possible, is heightened confidence, and never keep a kind word to yourself. The second motive for the content today is around motivation. How do we help to keep drive high? How do we keep drive high at work, that people are moved to do things, And so I do think if it's a celebratory culture, if it's an appreciative culture, if there's a lot of positive emotion, people will thrive. People will have more pep in their step. They won't be so defeated. Some folks leave meetings or touch bases or mid-year reviews, they leave it feeling completely depleted and defeated. And it's like you're only hearing what needs to change and what needs to be better or different. And, when all you're getting is the tough feedback or tough love or whatever, it's likely to knock a little bit of wind out of your sails. And so there's just, I think, a lot we can do, I'm not talking that we like BS people. I do think we have to be able to talk about what's not working. We have to talk about issues in business. We have to problem solve. But if there is this recurring celebration, appreciation, gratitude, positive body language, positive emotion in other ways throughout the day, then when there is a tough conversation to have, it doesn't completely derail the team or the individual, right? So we kind of want that. It's called a positivity ratio. We want the positivity to be nice and high so that when the tough stuff happens or the difficult things, we kind of still come out with some of that drive and motivation, and we don't feel like it is ongoing negativity, ongoing tough feedback, And the third drive or reason I think this content is important is we really want to celebrate successes, right? So in any business, in anyone's life or in anyone's business, anyone's organization, we can find things that are working well, and we can look for the successes. Do we need to solve problems? Absolutely. Do we need to put out fires? Absolutely. Do we need to address things that are problematic? Absolutely. But we also need to look at what's working well. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. So that's kind of a segue to some very specific applications for WINSday, celebrating wins, more possibility, more positivity within the workday. So I have kind of 3 specific examples to wrap us up today. So kind of piggybacking on this idea of positive emotion, how do we trigger more positive emotion? How do we use positive psychology within the workday? How do we even have conversations about what needs to change, but approach it with a positive perspective? So what I'm going to offer up is the use of what's called appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry, it's something used in my coaching practice and likely lots of other coaching practices as well. And so appreciative coaching looks for what's working well, what's going right, and what do we want more of in life. So it asks powerful questions. An appreciative question might also look like, what are you looking forward to in your career? Like, what's next for you? What are you looking forward to in your career? And so maybe this person isn't performing great, but you're asking them a positive question. What are you looking forward to? What do you want more of in your career? It's talking about change, but it's coming from a very positive perspective and hearing what that person's vision is, what they already know about themselves, what would get them excited for the future. So that's just an example. So when I open up meetings, or when I open up either a health coaching session or I open up a business meeting, I do try to lead with an appreciative question. So again, more appreciative questions. What are you looking forward to this quarter? What do you want more of in your life? What would fuel your success in the next 6 months? Where do you see yourself professionally in 5 years? None of this is negative. None of this is you're not doing a good job. It's all about what's possible, what do we know, what's already working, what do you want, what would be exciting to you. So it just takes a very positive approach. I don't think I have it handy, but there's a book I would recommend called Appreciative Coaching. And if any of this is interesting to you, how do you have powerful conversations with folks, but use the positive, and get the results you're after, but come at it from a really positive place. Can't say enough good things about the use of appreciative inquiry. Now, there are lots of other ways we can spread positive emotion within the workday. Obviously, celebrating successes. This came up on my team. One of my teammates said, can we celebrate successes every team meeting? And I was like, heck yeah, we can. Of course we can. Because there were certain times in the month we were doing success stories, or I would push out an email called WINSday, and it would have all the wins from our organization, like kind of summarized or recapped for the month. But I find that my team, and I find that my wellness program participants, they really like celebrating wins weekly. So celebrating wins weekly will do a lot in terms of spreading positive emotion. And so it allows you in that team meeting to say, like, hey guys, what headlines do you have? What good news do you have? What have we implemented recently that's working really well that we want to keep doing, or we want to scale, or we want to do more of? What successes have you had from sales conversations? Or what successes have you had in terms of closed deals? Or what successes have we had in terms of cash flow or new business? So any successes that can be celebrated will really inform what does the business want to keep doing, and what do we want to do more of, and how do we leverage that or scale that. But it's also going to keep that positive emotion high. And again, sometimes we're going to have more difficult conversations in meetings, but if there's some positivity to offset that, it just really helps with our resilience and our overall life satisfaction. The next thing I wanted to touch on, number 2, is how do we spread more goodwill? More goodwill within the workday, to strengthen relationships. And again, this will tie up into positive emotion as well. But it's a little bit more maybe targeted to an individual. And so my recommendation really centers on random acts of kindness. This is something that we've leveraged a lot in our wellness programs, encouraging workplaces, either as small groups or individually, to identify what are some random acts of kindness that could happen or unfold within the workday. And when I do this with teams and groups, people get really creative, and it's really fun to see how employees are choosing to show up for each other, choosing how to surprise them, whether it's like a small gift or it is words of appreciation, or letting them know like, hey, I know we don't work together, but I know you're an integral role in this company. And so people will do a lot of random acts of kindness, and it has been so awesome to witness. And so because of the work I do and because of some of the programs I'm creating and delivering, I get to see this. And it's been really nice to hear the feedback on that. Random acts of kindness can also be more, what would the word be? More anonymous. So the way I describe this is, say you're going through your workday and you encounter a situation that needs some attention. Any of us can choose to leave a situation better than we found it. So the example I use is, sometimes I go into the ladies' room, and the ladies' room, there's like water all over the counter, or there's paper towels on the floor. And it's like, if I can wipe that up, or if I can pick up that trash and put it away, like, I'm not going to get credit for it, but I feel like I'm doing the right thing. So that feels good to me. And then if somebody sees me do it, great. But it is going to show like a sense of goodwill. I care. I'm willing to hop in and be a team player. Like, say you take the last cup of coffee, make another pot of coffee, And so if that's the default, like everybody's looking for how they can leave a situation better than they found it, think of how far that can go in terms of relationship building, and keeping the morale of the team high. And again, it keeps things positive. And it's like the opposite of complaining. Some people are kind of putting complaints and gossip and all of that out into the world. And so we're kind of working to do the opposite of that in this moment. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was camaraderie. So obviously that's a positive emotion as well, like feeling like you are close in terms of relationships with your colleagues and coworkers. There's some social connection. There's some, again, I think about morale, but I also think about like this team building idea, or this idea of psychological safety. Like, we all have each other's back is how I think of camaraderie. And, we're genuinely interested in one another, and we're going to work together. So I think we can support this in the workday by having some social opportunities, of course, by having opportunities for learning and development, by allowing people to work in small groups, by allowing people to work cross-functionally and getting to work with one another. But I think about our wellness programs, and I think about some of the group programming that we're offering. And it's like, even something as simple, guys, this is so simple, something as simple as the employee yoga class. Like, I see so much good come out of that experience. I see positive emotion. I see people practicing self-care. I see people laughing. Like, we laugh our butts off in a couple of my yoga classes because we're having fun. Like, we don't take ourselves too seriously. People are cracking jokes. And that might not be everybody's ideal yoga class, but for us, it works, this workplace that I'm thinking of. And so there's just a lot of good that comes from getting groups together, making space for it to happen within the workday, not with some, anxiety-provoking icebreaker, but with true time. True time, space in the day for folks to work together, get to know one another. And again, in an application that's not maybe their day-to-day job, so some other type of learning, some other type of wellness practice. Yoga works really well for this group. We've also done it with like walking groups, running groups, etc., your employee resource groups. This kind of support, this kind of camaraderie, this kind of social connection, this type of fun. Now, fun is tricky. People have different ideas of what's fun. But all of this together, again, it all feeds up into a positive experience of the culture, ties to positive emotion. And again, like just to kind of summarize, because I did want to keep this a little more brief today, you know, there are other experiences, right? There are things like chronic complaining or Debbie Downer, Downer Dan. There are real pessimism challenges. There is such a thing as gossiping, or people not having each other's backs, or not feeling safe, or you're in a meeting and you throw out that wild idea and somebody shoots it down instantly. And so that's working against the type of culture that most folks are looking to create. So all of the solutions that I've offered up today, these are small ways to really start to impact culture, encourage people to show up very intentionally, celebrate successes, boost folks' confidence. Heck, even smiling in the hallway, smiling in a meeting, having your camera on, being a leader that is friendly and approachable and authentic. That goes a long way in terms of helping people to work together, and it'll really support folks in being more excited to go back to work, which is a big thing that some groups are navigating right now. So with that, I could go on and on. I do have a full keynote on this idea of celebration, celebrating successes within the workday, using some positive psychology basics. It's good for our health. It's good for our happiness. So if any of this interests you, I encourage you to reach out to me. I am at Katy, Katy, at wellnesscollective.com. If you could like or subscribe to this channel or this episode, that would be amazing as well. And with that, I'm going to get ready for spring break. My positive emotion around that is super high, and it's time. It's time to get away and to enjoy. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next month.